Lena gifted me a trip to Berlin as a birthday present. So where are we going?
To Berlin. Shoes.
I imagined having fun and relaxing in the sparkling Berlin atmosphere. Instead, I was overwhelmed by anguish, anxiety, and oppression. I have always wanted to visit Berlin, and Lena knew that, hence her gift. In my mind, I had pictures of all the stories I had heard about Berlin. A vibrant city where trends are born daily, the colorful youth, the techno scene, and a spirited nightlife. I should have visited Berlin in my 20s or 30s. In this age and era, I'm not particularly fond of techno music and rarely go to bed after 10 p.m. Spoiler alert, I didn't fall in love with the city. Its cosmopolitan imprinting didn't scream authenticity, but I blame globalization for that. During World War II, Berlin suffered from hundreds of air raids. It was pummeled with tens of thousands of tons of bombs by America, France, Britain, and the Soviet Red Air forces. It was almost totally bombed to the ground. The way Berlin is now made me feel small and insignificant. I'm not liking this city at all at the moment. This is the main square in Berlin. It's called Alexanderplatz, something, and it's so sterile. I've been to Germany before. I've been to Frankfurt, which is like a beautiful city. Wow, I love it. I hope my German friends don't hate me for this, but in some areas I felt like I was in an old Soviet Union city. A lot of vast empty space makes you feel small and cold. The streets are insanely large, and it takes minutes to cross from one side to another. Finding roads with 4 to 5 lanes for each side wasn't uncommon. Maybe someone likes it that way. I've also visited other German towns, such as Cologne, Munich, Frankfurt. The latter is a gem with so much character and uniqueness. We breathed some Berlinese folklore in the pubs and restaurants, where we enjoyed the traditional cuisine. We don't eat meat because we like animals best when alive, but we made an exception to experience food like the locals. We had currywurst, sausages, and Königsberger Klops. Lena forced me to try what is supposed to be the best kebab in Berlin. It was as good as it could have been, and I admit it was delicious. But it was still a kebab and not worth queuing for almost 2 hours. After 2 intense meaty meals, we felt heavy and exhausted. For the food is... How's the food?
Oh, it's not easy.
Tonight is gonna be a vegan dinner.
Yeah.
We looked for a decent vegan restaurant, and that was easy. Berlin is the European hotspot for vegans. Some even call it the vegan world's capital. What we really liked was the street art alley on Resenthaler Strasse. It is almost impossible to find if you don't know what it is. Even we, who were purposely looking for it, had a hard time spotting the little alley that opened up to such a unique and dynamic space.
Hi.
Do you like this place?
Oh, hello. It's a surprise.
That is the Berlin I was looking for. And I know there are tons of similar marvels in town. We didn't have the time to explore them all. We should have avoided wasting an entire day visiting the main attractions. I would have been just as satisfied by looking them up online. And now you're probably wondering what made this trip a horror film, one of the worst I've ever seen. We spent 2 out of 3 days visiting the most horrendous and disturbing historical evidence of how low humankind can go. The Jewish Museum Berlin, the Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe, also known as the Holocaust Memorial, Berlin Hohenzollern Memorial, Checkpoint Charlie, the remains of the Berlin Wall. After visiting the Dachau concentration camp a few years earlier, I thought that nothing would ever affect me that much. The Jewish Museum Berlin made me rethink that. When you visit any concentration camp, you get to face the graphic side of the Holocaust, which wasn't just gassing the Jews and other minorities that wouldn't fit the so-called ideal of the Aryan race, such as gays, disabled, gypsies, communists, and those that disagreed with the Third Reich, political dissidents. They also conducted atrocious experiments on these people. One that I'll never forget was people waking up from anesthesia and realizing that their legs were reversed, like frogs, with their knees pointing backward. When I saw those images, it was hard even to imagine it was all real. The Jewish Museum Berlin's architectural symbolism was designed to give a unique sensory experience without graphic images, by making you feel the fear, oppression, and instability, as if you were a Jew, before, during, and after the war. It was built to evoke and provoke those emotions. The Holocaust Tower, devoid of windows and natural light, allows muffled noise coming from the outside world, creating a sense of despair and isolation. It encourages the visitor to contemplate the enormity of the tragedy that unfolded during the Holocaust. Right after entering, you're immediately deprived of external stimuli and surrounded by the oppressing darkness, conveying the magnitude of the genocide. The Garden of Exile was another multisensory experience. I knew nothing about it and did not understand the entrance warning. But as soon as we got in, I did. We were constantly losing our balance and disoriented, as the Jews felt when deported from their homes and communities due to persecution. Wow. Are you stable?
No.
I'm not. It's crazy. The museum offers too many insights to cover in one visit. To me, the most terrifying one was the room with all the racial laws enacted beginning in 1931. I felt ashamed for not having read these before. Ignoring that this happened is not excusable. After learning that almost 6 million Jews were killed in Europe, it was time to end our visit. We rested a little while inside the museum's garden, emotionally devastated. To soften up the mood, just kidding, we started talking about the Israel conflict with the Palestinians, which divides Lena and me among millions of others. Even though I'm not Jewish, I side with Israel on this, and I understand that it's a complex topic. I share my perspective on this subject in this video here. After the Jewish Museum Berlin, we needed something light, sober, fresh. So we visited the Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe and its exhibition. Again, anxiety and disgust for humankind were the shared common feelings between Lena and me. Let's talk about the Berlin Wall, shall we? Of course, we visited the wall and what remains of it. Not all of the barrier separating West and East Germany was destroyed. They left a big chunk of it to remember that horror. They did it for the exact reason why they didn't turn down the concentration camps. They must stay there to remember what we've done. Artists from all over the world painted the wall surfaces, and some of these paintings became iconic pieces of art. I'm not sure if I like that. Of course, I love the drawings, but they welcome and cheer you up. I wanted to feel the oppression of the atrocity and the drawings didn't allow me to experience the real thing. I remember the day the wall was torn down. I was 17, exactly 35 years ago. It seems like yesterday. And at that time, despite the news being broadcast for days, I had no idea what all the fuss was about. At school, they told us that it was a story of repression and conflict between the two German states, East and West. But I didn't quite get the whole picture of what was going on. If you tune in the refresher, let me summarize the Cold War that took place between 1948 and 1989. After World War II ended in 1945, the victorious Allies split Berlin into 4 parts, controlled by the US, England, France, and the Soviet Union. Later, these 4 parts became 2. One controlled by the US, England, and France unified and became West Germany. The Soviet wing became East Germany under the Soviet Communist Party. The Cold War was an ongoing political rivalry between the United States, the Soviet Union, and their respective allies that developed after World War II. George Orwell first named this hostility between the two superpowers in an article published in 1935. Those were the Cold War years. Although in Berlin, the conflict was truly real. America and the Soviet Union were pointing their tanks at each other at Checkpoint Charlie, a door between the wall that allowed the diplomats to pass. You can visit Checkpoint Charlie today. This is how it looks, a place where people take selfies. Both Lina and I didn't have a deeper understanding of how life was in East Germany in those years. We decided to dedicate our last day to visit the Berlin Hohenschönhausen Memorial, another terrifying place where persecutions and abuse were conducted by the Soviets for 44 years after World War II. The Stasi prison was built into a large off-map area, restricted by a large military town. For many years, its existence was ignored. The Stasi was the state security service in East Germany, tied to the Soviet KGB, even though it was officially granted independence in 1957. The prison's purpose was to force prisoners to confess to alleged criminal activities, such as wanting to leave East Germany, helping dissidents in their political activities, or escaping. Confessions were often forced, even in the absence of crimes. The Stasi personnel used to abduct the suspect dissidents in a vehicle like this. They drove these vehicles for hours to induce the prisoners into thinking that they were taken far away from Berlin, and then conducted them inside the Stasi prison in Hohenschönhausen. The camp's living conditions were appalling, marked by fatalities resulting from malnutrition, illness, and even the common cold. While torture and physical violence were frequently utilized at Hohenschönhausen, particularly during the 1950s, psychological intimidation emerged as the primary tool of political suppression. Methods including sleep deprivation, complete isolation, threats against loved ones, and the use of water-filled cells to hinder the prisoner from sleeping or sitting. Just when we thought that the horror ceased with the Nazi defeat in 1945, in East Germany, up until I was 17, the horror continued. At that time, I dreamed of becoming a musician, while less than 1,000 kilometers away from my own town, torture and abuse were consumed daily. It took 28 years before the wall was torn down.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Yet, today some people are still fighting to build more walls, to raise new barriers for the sake of protecting imaginary lines that they call borders, arrogating the right to live in a safe environment just because they were born inside those imaginary lines. Those same people advocate for Christianity's values and speak in Jesus' name. The same Jesus who said, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." If Jesus was alive today, he would slap those people in the face and tell them to wake up, that those borders don't exist, that were imagined by humankind in the last 200 years, but never existed for over 4.5 billion years. Even now, when you watch the Earth from the International Space Station, those borders some people are willing to die to protect aren't there. We will ever realize how dumb we are. I knew a great human being trying to give us that wake-up slap with a beautiful song we all know and adore. For sure, this trip to Berlin changed me forever. I know what I want to be now. I want to be like that man in this picture, who refused to raise his right arm for the obligatory German salute. Maybe I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one.
It's utterly impossible for me to build my life on a foundation of chaos, suffering, and death. I see the world being slowly transformed into a wilderness. I hear the approaching thunder that, one day, will destroy us too. I feel the suffering of millions. And yet, when I look up at the sky, I somehow feel that everything will change for the better, that this cruelty too will end, that peace and tranquility will return once more. In the meantime, I must hold on to my ideals. Perhaps the day will come when I'll be able to realize them. Yours, Anne M. Frank.